Now we're transitioning seamlessly, I might add, right into lesson 4. You guys ready to go? All right, lesson number 4. Does God exist? We're still in the teleological argument. We're now talking about the origin of life. We're looking at life. And let's start with what the Darwinists say we all evolved from. You see this? This is a one-celled amoeba. Darwinists say we came from something like this, some singular cell. And they say that the theory of macroevolution is you go from here to you. In other words, it's from the goo to you via the zoo. All right? Or from the infantile to the reptile to the crocodile to the gentile. All right? And this is the infantile. Now, before we talk about this, let me point out, this might be an observation you may not have seen before, but here's the important observation. It doesn't say made by God or made by natural forces on it, does it? You have to make an interpretation. Now, what I'm about to say here, I wish I had more time to talk about, but I don't. There's a section in the book on it, and there's an article on it, and here is the title to the article. Science doesn't say anything scientists do. Science doesn't say anything scientists do. Data always needs to be interpreted. And when you come back next week, hopefully you will, when we talk about evolution, we're going to get into this more. Because you will see that many of the scientists are saying we evolved. And why are they saying that? Because they have a preconceived philosophy which only provides them with one answer to the question where we came from. And what's the answer? Natural forces, natural selection, Darwinism. They philosophically ruled everything out that could be intelligent. So science doesn't say anything scientists do. All data needs to be interpreted. The question is, how do you interpret this data? Well, before we get into that, we've got to really define what we mean by science. What is science? It's very difficult to define, but science, at a minimum, is a search for causes. When scientists are trying to do their work, they're trying to discover what particular effect was caused by what particular cause. We're involved in cause and effect. That's what scientists do. And there are at least two types of causes. There are natural causes and intelligent causes. Natural causes and intelligent causes. Or non-intelligent and intelligent. We're using natural for non-intelligent. Now, how many people in here have ever been to the Grand Canyon? You've been to the Grand Canyon, right? Beautiful geologic formation, right? When you look at the canyon there, you go, wow, that's really beautiful. But can everybody see the difference between, well, let me ask you a question this way before I get into that. When you try and figure out what was the cause of the canyon, do you have to posit that some intelligent being stuck his metaphorical finger down there to create that canyon? Or can you say that natural forces did it? Like a lot of water, maybe a great flood, right? Wind, rain can create a canyon. In fact, we can recreate canyons now. We get a landmass, we put a lot of water on it, we'll get a canyon, right? We can do that. So if you're a scientist looking for what caused the canyon, you can come up with that possible cause. But can everybody see the difference between this geologic formation and this geologic formation? Mount Rushmore. Certainly you wouldn't say that erosion caused the faces on Mount Rushmore. Certainly not natural erosion, maybe political erosion, but not natural erosion, right? How do we know? Because we could throw a whole bunch of water, wind, rain at a landmass, a bunch of rock. We'll never get the 4 presidents in that kind of detail on the side of a mountain. Natural forces don't do that. So all we're saying here is that an example of a natural cause would be whatever caused the Grand Canyon, and an example of an intelligent cause would be whatever caused Mount Rushmore. You say, why are we going through this, Frank? Because this is how we try and discover what caused the first life. We use something called, which I'll get into here in a minute, the principle of uniformity. Let's suppose we come across a statue that we didn't know how it came to be. We know who caused Mount Rushmore. We saw them, right? We have video of it. We know who did it. But this Buddhist statue, which was somewhere in Afghanistan before the Taliban blew it up, it was in the side of a mountain. Nobody alive today saw who did it. It comes from hundreds of years ago. In fact, that statue, the bottom of the picture has a little man on it. That statue is probably 40 stories high, okay, into the side of a mountain. The Taliban blew it up because they thought it was blasphemous to Allah, okay? But if you want to figure out what caused that particular sculpture in the side of a mountain, how would you do that? Well, what caused an unseen past event? If we see that something like Mount Rushmore requires an intelligent being, we should assume that something in the past, like Mount Rushmore, also required an intelligent being. This is called the principle of uniformity, that the past, or I should say, the present is the key to the past. If you want to know what happened in the past, you've got to assume that things work basically in the past like they do in the present. If 500 years ago, wind and rain could create statues, then we don't know what created that statue, right? Could have been the wind and the rain. But we have to assume that nature is uniform in the sense that whatever happened in the past worked just like it works today. So we're going to say it had to be an intelligent being that did it, an intelligent cause. So when we look at the first life, simple life, supposedly, we're going to see if today it requires an intelligent designer, then in the past it must have required an intelligent designer. In fact, using the principle of uniformity, in fact, this particular cell in Darwin's day was not considered to be any big deal. That maybe non-living chemicals could come together by natural forces, create a cell, and then voila, here we are. Natural selection could take over, and voila, here we are, right? We don't need any intelligent being. Today we know, however, that a cell has far more information in it and appears to be far more designed than anything we've dreamed about from Darwin's day. In fact, cells, and you have trillions of them in your body, are like cities in terms of their interconnectedness. There's all sorts of processes and functions going on seamlessly between one another inside a cell. A cell is a marvel of interconnected machinery that's alive. It's just amazing. So, as you'll see here in a minute, there's no such thing as a simple cell. Simple compared to others maybe, but the first living thing, if it was a cell, was incredibly well designed and had an amazing amount of information in it. How much information? In order to demonstrate this, I got to take you to your breakfast table. How many people in here like alphabet cereal? You like alphabet cereal? Okay, Ralph, suppose you're a teenager. You want to have a bowl of alphabet cereal, and one day you come downstairs to have a bowl of alphabet cereal, and you see the cereal is knocked over on the table, and right in the middle of the table the letters spell, "Take out the garbage, Mom." What are you going to assume? The cat knocked the box over? Earthquake shook the house? No, you're going to say that's intelligent design from an intelligent being, Mom. Principle of uniformity, right? That you've never seen natural cause create, take out the garbage, Mom. You only see moms do that, all right? Or suppose you're laying out on the beach one day and you see in the clouds, drink Coke. What do you assume? Unusual cloud formation? Wind coming from the north today. No, you're going to say there had to be a skywriter up there, even if I didn't see him up there. He had to have been there. Or you're walking along the beach and you see in the sand, John loves Mary. What do you think? The crabs came out of the water and did that? The waves made that? No, you're going to say that had to be the product of intelligence because due to the principle of uniformity, that you only see messages coming from minds. You don't see them coming from natural forces. In fact, this is the whole premise of the movie Contact. Has anyone in here seen the movie Contact with Jodie Foster and Matthew McConaughey? That was about a real program called SETI, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. It's still out there. It used to be government funded. No longer government funded like everything else is. But anyway, what it was, and it still is, it's still out there, antennas tuned to the heavens. Why do they have their antennas tuned to the heavens? They're looking for a message from outer space. And if they get a message from outer space, it'll prove ET's out there. Carl Sagan, the great atheist who died about 10 years or so ago, helped get this started. His novel was called Contact. And he said, if we got one message from outer space, it'll prove ET is out there. How long would the message need to be, Carl? Only a sentence long would do it, like, send more Beatles. You know, we like Lennon and McCartney, or whatever. That would be enough to prove that ET is out there. Why? Because they know that messages only come from minds. Even a short message like that would prove ETs. If you saw the movie, Jodie Foster, what does she get? She gets prime numbers from like 1 to 111 or something on her headset, and she runs into the lab and goes, that's got to be ET out there. That's the sign of intelligence. And James Wood, who plays the Fed, comes into the lab there and he says, prime numbers, hey, if these aliens are so intelligent, why don't they just speak English? And Jodie Foster correctly says, because math is the only universal language. You can reduce all alphabets to math. That's how we broke the Japanese code in World War II. Reduce it to math. And if there's a certain pattern to it, that's the product of intelligence. It's information. Well, if a message like take out the garbage mom requires a mom, or drink Coke requires a skywriter, or John loves Mary requires a John or a Mary, what about this message? DNA, the 4-letter genetic alphabet within every living thing. You have DNA, I have DNA, a banana has DNA. And the amount of DNA in first of all, in the human genome is about 3 billion letters long. All that has to be in the right order, or there'll be trouble. And this DNA is like a software code. In fact, Bill Gates, who's no Christian, as you know, put it this way. He said, DNA is like a computer program, but far, far more advanced than any software ever created here at Microsoft. It's a software code. That's what DNA is. It's literally you're programming a code. Now, who puts a code together? Minds put codes together. In fact, DNA is like take out the garbage mom. It's just a lot longer. A lot more precise. In fact, how much of DNA is in a one-celled amoeba? And before I tell you, let me point out that an amoeba, you could line up several hundred amoebas in an inch. And in each one of the amoebas, you have 1,000 volumes worth of an encyclopedia of information in there. Now, to believe that 1,000 volumes of an encyclopedia resulted by natural forces is like believing that the Library of Congress resulted from an explosion in a printing shop. You see, I don't have enough faith to believe that. You have to have more faith to believe that that happened by natural forces than just to say, look, the first life requires an intelligent cause. Now, some of you are going, wait, Frank. How do you know there's this much information in amoeba? Who told you this? Some Christian? No, you know who told me this? Richard Dawkins. In his own book, The Blind Watchmaker, he admits there's that much information in an amoeba. Where does this come from? You say, oh, Frank, this is just another God of the gaps argument. You're plugging God in because one day we're going to find a natural cause and then you're going to look stupid. This is not a God of the gaps argument. Why? First of all, you can keep searching for natural forces to create life. You know, Pasteur's beaker is still sterile. Spontaneous generation by natural causes does not appear to occur. But you can continue to keep looking, go for it, keep trying. But it's not just that we lack a natural explanation for life. It's that life itself is positive evidence for an intelligent cause. When you see take out the garbage mom, you don't just lack a natural explanation. You don't go, gee, I wonder what natural law could have caused that. You go, that's positive evidence for mom. See, it's not a God of the gaps argument. In fact, Stephen Meyer, who wrote a book, I think in 2009, called Signature in the Cell, went through all the various possible ways life could have come into existence by natural forces, the ones that atheists are always trying to put forth. Yeah, maybe this, maybe the RNA world, maybe DNA, maybe there was a prebiotic soup. He goes through all these possibilities. And he comes to the conclusion it's got to be some intelligence. And here's what he says. He says, our uniform experience affirms that specified information, whether inscribed hieroglyphics, written in a book, encoded in a radio signal, or produced in a simulation experiment, always arises from an intelligent source, from a mind and not a strictly material process. When I ask you who wrote this book, you would say, well, Richard Dawkins, right? That's true. But if I were to say, no, Richard Dawkins didn't write this book, you know who wrote the book? The Laws of Ink and Paper. You would go, wait, the Laws of Ink and Paper? They can't write a book. Well, the Laws of Ink and Paper might have some, and the Laws of Ink and Paper do have something to do with why the letters adhere to the paper in the book, right? But the laws of ink and paper don't determine why the letters are arranged this way, do they? A mind does. And the same is true about you. Your DNA isn't just chemicals. Why is the DNA in the order it is in? that appears to require a mind, not merely natural forces. Yes, natural forces have something to do with it, but they can't explain it all. Just like natural forces can't explain why the letters in this book are this way. By the way, it's not just, when it comes to life, it's not just that there's a code in there that points to a intelligent cause, is that there's a chicken and egg problem when it comes to life. What's the chicken and egg problem? The chicken and egg problem is that life requires proteins, DNA, RNA, and the cell in order to have cellular life. Here's the problem. Proteins need DNA, and DNA needs proteins. And DNA needs RNA, and RNA needs DNA. And an RNA needs a cell, and a cell needs RNA. And a cell needs proteins, and proteins need a cell, and they all need one another. Why am I telling you this? Because this is called irreducible complexity. That you can't start here and get all these other things, because in order to have, say, RNA, you've got to have a cell. You've got to have proteins and DNA if you're going to have life. You can't gradually build life this way. At least it doesn't appear like you can. You appear to have all of this together at once. So let's go back to our cell here. The important observation, it doesn't say made by God on it, or it doesn't say made by natural forces on it. You have to make a judgment. You have to interpret the data. Science doesn't tell you how to interpret the data. Science just provides the information. We have an amoeba. It's got 1,000 volumes of an encyclopedia worth of information in it. It appears to be irreducibly complex. How did it get here? Can any known natural force do this? No. Can we keep looking for a natural force that'll do it? Sure. At this point, what's the most reasonable conclusion? We have positive evidence for intelligence. Notice, what's the most reasonable for the origin of life? We have an equal burden of proof with the atheist. Atheists must support why it is more likely that life arose by natural forces. Theists must support why it is more likely that life arose by intelligent intervention. From what I've seen so far, the way I interpret the data is it appears to require intelligence due to the principle of uniformity and everything we know about natural forces. What do natural forces do? They do the same thing over and over again. They don't give you a message. They just do the same thing over and over again. By the way, there's only 4 known natural forces. Does anyone know what they are? There's only 4 of them. Gravity's one, the electromagnetic magnetic force is another, and the strong and weak nuclear forces. That's it. Darwinists have to explain, first of all, where did those forces come from? Secondly, where did the universe come from? And why does it appear so designed? Thirdly, where did the first life come from? By those 4 natural forces, which they still haven't explained. And then they're going to have to explain where subsequent life came from. And that's, by the way, what we're going to do next time. I think the best conclusion at this point is that life came from an intelligent being. And oh, by the way, do you know what? Richard Dawkins actually agrees. He does? Well, he suggested it. How many have seen the movie Expelled? Did you see the end of the movie Expelled? By the way, Expelled is not about whether intelligent design or Darwinism is true. Expelled is more about academic freedom. And what it means is that many people who are suggesting that it's possible intelligence was behind life or is behind life are being expelled from the academy. They're losing their jobs. They're not getting tenure. They're being blackballed. And Ben Stein, who's not a Christian, he's Jewish, interviews a bunch of atheists about this. And at the end of the movie, he goes and he interviews Richard Dawkins, and he sits down with him and he says, Dr. Dawkins, how did life begin? And originally Dawkins said, well, you know what? I have no idea. And Stein said, well, come on, what do you think your best guess is? And he said, well, I suppose you could say that life was brought here initially on Earth by aliens. At that point, Ben Stein said, I don't believe it. I don't believe it. Dr. Dawkins believes in intelligent design. Why? Why did he say that? Because an alien's an intelligent designer, right? Now, why would Dawkins be okay with an alien bringing life here but not God? I have a theory, and I'm speculating. Here's my theory. An alien doesn't bring morality with him. God does. You don't have to bow your knee to an alien. But if God exists, you do bow your knee to God, and Dawkins doesn't want to do that. By the way, this puts the problem off one further step, doesn't it? Where did the alien come from? By the way, this is not like asking who made God, because if God is outside the universe, he's unmade. But an alien is a created being. Who created the alien? I mean, if natural forces can't create life here on Earth, why should we expect natural forces, wherever the natural forces came from, to create life somewhere else in the universe and then bring it here? It takes a lot of faith to believe that that's the case, isn't it? There's no empirical evidence for this. It violates the principle of uniformity, yet Dawkins suggests it. Why? Because that G word. You just want to avoid the G word. That's what it seems like to me. In fact, Ron Carlson, who died recently, a friend who used to go to college campuses and present reasons why Darwinism is wrong and reasons why intelligent design appears to be right, went to a college once, and his biology professor invited him to give a lecture onto why Darwinism might have problems. And he gives the lecture, and then he goes to lunch with the professor afterwards, and he says to the professor, "Hey, what'd you think of my lecture?" And the professor said, "Well, Ron, I think what you say is right. I think Darwinism does have some problems, but I'm going to keep teaching it anyway." And Ron said, "Why would you do that?" And he said, "Because if it's true that we came from slimy green algae, then I can sleep with whoever I want to sleep with. Darwinism is morally comfortable." In fact, that's really the elephant in the room, isn't it? The elephant in the room is always morality. You notice that? Recently, I've asked questions of hostile atheists on college campuses. People who start asking a question, and before I'm done answering it, they're on to the next question/objection, as if they're not even listening to me. And by the way, these two questions I recommend you can ask of anybody who's not a Christian. So use these two questions this week. Question, I had this hostile atheist in Michigan, it happened to be, and I said, Sir, do you mind if I ask you a question? If I do, will you give me a brutally honest answer? That's question number one. He said, "Sure, go ahead." I said, "If Christianity were true, would you become a Christian?" He said, "No." I said, No, wait. You claim to be an atheist, a beacon of reason. Never mind that reason can't exist if atheism's true, because if we're just molecules in motion, if we're just materials, then we're not really thinking, we're just reacting. But let's leave that aside. You claim to be a beacon of reason, and I ask you if something were true, would you believe it? And you say no? How is that reasonable? Had a lady at Davidson, same question. If Christianity were true, would you become a Christian? No! No. Why not? I can almost guarantee you the reason. It's not really here. Where is it? It's here. They don't want it to be true. Now, let's be fair about this. There's a lot of Christians who just want it to be true. Christianity, that is. And if you were to ask them if it were true, they couldn't give you a reason. Oh, Jesus lives in my heart. That's all you get. Which may be true, but you can't prove that to me. So we're supposed to be people who are equipped with answers. So I suggest, if you can this week, use those two questions. If I ask you a serious spiritual question, will you give me a brutally honest answer? Question 2, if Christianity were true, would you become a Christian? By the way, if they say yes, what do? You give them the gospel, you give them a book to show them evidence that it's true, and you follow up with them. You do a little study with them. Maybe you use this curriculum, which will be out soon. That's what you do. All right? Now, next time, we're going to talk about evolution, macroevolution. Then we're going to talk about the moral law for God, which is a hot issue on college campuses, I can tell you that. Then we're going to talk about miracles. Derwin will do them. I'll just talk about them. And then we're going to get into the New Testament. Now, does anybody have any questions before we go? We just got a few minutes for questions.
Could you give us briefly your thoughts about why is it so urgent to address the arguments of atheists? there are a lot of threats in this world to believers, a lot of threats to the truth. Why is atheism, you wrote the book obviously for a reason to address a threat. Tell us a little bit about your thoughts there.
Okay, good question. Well, atheism has really had a renaissance since 9/11. Why? Well, many of who are called the new atheists, like Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens and Sam Harris and Daniel Dennett, wrote books after 9/11, and what they basically did was they pulled all religions together and said they're all evil on account of what happened in 9/11. And so they've gotten a popular sort of resurgence since then. Now, this isn't to minimize that we ought not be discussing other issues as well. Our book really, it's called I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist, but it's really a book that talks about why Christianity is true. We call it I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist because it's a catchy title and people will go, oh, that's interesting, let's take a look at that, But it's not just dealing with atheism. It's dealing with proving positively that Christianity is true. I have had a couple of debates with Christopher Hitchens. Tragically, Christopher just died in December, but you can see both those debates on our website for free, crossexamined.org. But as Christians, we're to be able to converse intelligently with people of all different faiths, whether it's atheism, whether it's Hinduism, whether it's Islam. I mean, we should be able to have a good dialogue with people on some of those issues. Now, you can't be an expert in everything. As I think Churchill said, everyone's ignorant just in different subjects, right? So you try and inform yourself on your own worldview and maybe worldviews of others who you think you're going to run into more frequently than others. Anybody else? Yes, sir, back over here.
Could you address the issue that some atheists will say that morality arises from natural selection because it's really just enlightened self-interest, and if the rest of the crowd doesn't like what you're doing, then they'll stamp you out?
Okay, excellent question. I would normally save this for next time because we're going to talk about morality, but since you brought it up now, and it's a great question, let's deal with it, because you're going to get this, that morality comes from evolution. Let me just briefly go through this because it's a very important question. First of all, moral laws are not chemical or biological. They are immaterial and come from personal agents. You can't get a moral law from a molecule. In fact, in my debate with Hitchens, I said, Christopher, when you do something wrong, who are you offending? The carbon atom? The benzene molecule? You don't have a moral obligation to chemicals, nor can a chemical be a moral law. I mean, did Hitler just have bad molecules? No. Okay. Secondly, chemistry and biology are descriptive, not prescriptive. Evolution, if it's true at all, describes what does survive, not what ought to survive. Why humans? Why not roaches? Who said humans should survive? You always, whenever you're talking about morality, you always get to the who said. Who said? Evolution? What is evolution? It's a biological process. How does it have the authority to tell me what to do? Should we rape to survive? I mean, if evolution's about survival, why not rape to survive? Because you can prolong the species by raping, can't you? So if evolution's our standard, then rape is fine. What Hitler did was just fine. Why? Because he's trying to create the uber race, the super race. So you wipe out all the undesirables, you wipe out all the weak people who are taking resources from the strong people so you can improve the stronger race. Should we murder the weak to help others to survive? That's what I just mentioned. Since evolution is a process of change, then morals must change. Rape may one day be considered good, according to evolution, right? Finally, why cooperate when not cooperating often helps you survive? You always hear particularly on college campuses, I get this all the time. Well, morals just came from the fact that we need to cooperate with one another. If we don't cooperate, we won't survive, and we've got to survive. Well, no, you don't need to cooperate. You don't need to cooperate at all. Stalin didn't cooperate with anyone. Stalin murdered 20 million of his own countrymen and then died on his deathbed, shaking his fist at God one last time. Castro hasn't had to cooperate with anybody. You don't have to cooperate to get along. In fact, quite often, if you don't cooperate, you can get ahead in earthly terms, can't you? So the whole objection misses the point. Evolution can't explain why murder is wrong. It can't explain why rape is wrong. And you only have a moral obligation to persons. You don't have a moral obligation to impersonal forces. Let me point out one other thing, too. I don't even have it up here. Survival is not our top moral category, is it? Of course, to glorify God. It might even be just to save somebody else. On September 26, 2006, or September 29, 2006, Petty Officer Michael Monsoor, U.S. Navy SEAL, is on the roof of a building in Ramadi, Iraq, with 2 other SEALs, and he's standing in front of a doorway, and a terrorist throws a grenade and hits Monsoor in the chest. It hits the ground. He can leap through the door and save himself, but he has a split second to make a decision. If he does leap through the door, the other 2 SEALs are dead. What does he do? He leaps on the grenade while yelling grenade. The grenade detonates. 30 minutes later, he's dead. 1 SEAL had a small piece of shrapnel in his leg, nothing else. At his funeral, 1 SEAL said, Mikey looked death in the face that day, and he said, "You will not take my brothers, I will go in their stead." Toward the end of President Bush's last term, he invited Monsoor's parents into the White House to give them their son's Medal of Honor. And every Navy SEAL virtually on the West Coast showed up to Monsoor's funeral. And when they passed the casket, they took off their golden tridents, which are very difficult to get. I was in the Navy, I was a naval flight officer. It was difficult to get wings. It was infinitely more difficult to get Navy SEAL tridents. Yet every one of the SEALs took their tridents off and pressed their tridents into the coffin of Monsoor as they passed. Now, Monsoor didn't survive, but everybody universally looks at that act of sacrifice as morally superior to mere survival. In fact, Jesus himself said, the best way to love somebody, you can't show love for anyone more so than to die for them in John 15:13, and that's exactly what Christ does for us. In fact, this is the way I ended one of my debates with Hitchens, because Hitchens tried to say that the sacrifice of Christ was immoral. There couldn't be a more moral act than the sacrifice of Christ, and you can't explain that by evolution. All right. That's a good way to end. What do you think? All right.